share with you. This particular quilt is, the name is Tribe, but I've been thinking about changing the name. I don't know. It's probably the oldest quilt that I have here to share with you, and it is based on the traditional quilt block called crossed square. And the block itself is right here. And the thing that's a little tricky, and you'll see the other format that I use with these particular quilt blocks in the next quilt, but it's composed of the quarter log cabin and then sashing. And in this case, the sashing here goes all the way from the top to the bottom, and then there's this extra sashing right here. This particular quilt was part of an exhibition called Layered and Stitched. It was not part of Layered and Stitched. It was called, and now I can't remember what it is. It was a joint effort between SAQA, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and the Modern Quilt Guild. And the Modern Quilt Guild selected a selection of older quilts that they felt were precursors to the modern quilt movement. And it was actually the cover girl for the catalog, and you would think that I could remember the name of the exhibition. But that's that. And let's do a flip around on the quilts, and I'll just share with you the backs. And I use shot cottons on the back, that's a brand name. The correct term is crossweave. So if you think of Kleenex or tissue, shot cotton is a brand, peppercorey, oak shots, those are all crossweaves, which the warp and the weft are different colors. And what I found, I experimented with solid fabrics, batiks, prints, and I found that the shot cottons do the best job of bringing my quilting forward and making it look really good. So that's what I use on my backs, and I do outline every area, and I go around it twice, and then I fill it in with a matching color. Occasionally, almost every time I share my quilts, actually, if you want to flip it back around, someone will say, well, how did you decide to put that design on the back? And it's because it's the design on the front, right? So the green thread matches the green. I guess if I did this, you might be able to see how they are connected. And another thing I want to point out here is I face my quilts. I like to do a very small facing because I want as much of the back to show as possible. And you're going to see some interesting different types of quilt labels. I do a sleeve on the top and a sleeve on the bottom. The sleeve on the bottom is just for a slat, which will weight the quilt and make it look really nice as it hangs against the background or the back, on the wall. Okay. So this quilt is part of a series that I call Color Grids. And now we're going to look at another one over here. This quilt was part of Layered and Stitched, which was a exhibition curated by SAQA, Studio Art Quilt Associates. And what they did is they wrote a book. It's called Art Quilts Unfolding, and it's the first 50 years of the art quilt. And they submitted, it was an open call. You could submit one quilt for each decade that you had been quilting. So I submitted 2 quilts, and one of them was accepted, both to be part of the book and to be part of the traveling exhibit. And the exhibition traveled, I think it traveled to Australia. But it was involved in that weird COVID glitch where the quilts were being supposed to be exhibited and weren't necessarily exhibited for about a year and a half. So this is also, and if you could lift it up so that, just lift it up. Yeah, well, so that it's, yes. This is cross square also, but in this particular format, I can hold that up if you want me to, that's the actual quilt block, and these are actually made with prints, which a lot of people ask me if I use prints or not, and I do use prints. I think that prints up the difficulty level if you're wanting to get really high contrast work, that using solids, and if you can, here, I'll just hold it, maybe. I don't know if, all right, but I'm going to be talking from behind a quilt now, so, yeah. Someone else, maybe someone that's tall, yeah, or, yeah.
The arms get tired.
The arms get very tired. It's a really, I've had this job before and is very tiring. So, maybe we can switch out. Okay. What was I saying? So this is the block, right? And I use prints, and I do a thing which I call It's like fussy cutting with your ruler. I don't use templates, but I use the 1/4 inch on my ruler to outline these particular shapes and then piece them together. So this layout has 9 color grid blocks, and actually each one of these is its own quilt multiplied out. So there are 9 quilts that are related to these 9 blocks. I think we saw this quilt in one of the lectures during the workshops. And we'll flip that around and show the back for just a minute. A different type of label here. My labels change and you'll see some of them are not that fancy. So that is the back of that quilt. Okay, let's look at the next one. So speaking of the fussy cutting with a ruler, this quilt, which is, in some ways I think of it as a more minimalist example of my work in that this is just the plaid. There's not a lot of other things going on. There aren't stripes and checks and other things. But it's an example of the fussy cutting of the printed fabrics. And the reason this quilt exists is because I wrote an article for Quilting Arts Magazine that is about these plaids and how to make them. I write 1 or 2 articles for Quilting Arts Magazine about every year and a half. And we can flip this over and we'll look at the back.
We'll get a system.
Yeah.
How we use those.
So, yeah, that's, more shot cottons. You can see the quilting, and yeah, that's that. So I've been working with these linear units for a long time, but in the background, I have been exploring curved piecing, and this is the first curved pieced quilt, and it is based on the quilt block called Flowering Snowball. And it is cut entirely without rulers, which is a little bit difficult for this particular quilt block. And the way that I finally sorted out how to piece it, that you piece these 3 units together, these 3 units together, and then you're going to sew that center unit to one side and then the other side. And you're going to see a much more complex example of this quilt in just a second. But before we do that, we'll flip it around. And that's the back. So I think this is Pepper Quarry, which is her colors are a little richer than the Kate Fawcett shot cottons, and yeah, that's that. Now this one is the complex version of that same block, and there are 4 flowering snowballs in this. So you can see the unit is right here, right? And then, yeah, it's all piecework. When in the class that we had earlier this week, and we were making prints, these are all examples of different prints that we made. We did shark teeth and stack stripes and mirrored stripes. And this is one way that you can take all those units and add them to a block. So the premise of this quilt is really 4 flowering snowball blocks blown up and then filled with different types of piecing. And we'll take a look at the back. Oh, and I should also say that this quilt was awarded at QuiltCon Together, which would have been 2021 for the Modern Quilt Guild. It was best piecing, yes, best piecing, and yeah, that's the back. And then I have one more, which is not finished. It needs the facing, and I thought I would bring it so that I could put the facing on. It's amazing how much threads can be attached to something while you think you've cleaned it off. This quilt is actually a workshop quilt from studying with Nancy Crow. And the concept behind this quilt, which I think you can figure out pretty easily, is that you create a motif or a quilt block, and then you're going to vary the size. And there were very specific assignments related to color in using pastels and flat and glowing colors, both in the black backgrounds and in the colors in these curved egg shapes. Now we'll take a look at the back, and it has not been faced yet, and it has not actually been cleaned up, which is interesting because you start to see little threads all over the place. Yep, and those are my quilts. Thank you.